All right, so let me. We had a few things and some very very deep topics today, and I'll try to deal with them. So we have what just Tarj asked me now the ten tribes, the Jews that we don't that have been, so to speak, lost. Where are they? Which the Talmud discusses in great detail. What happens to the 10 tribes? Will they come back? Won't they come back? Are they lost? Are they not lost? The whole very complicated discussion. We also have the question of names of angels. We'll get to that. It's complicated. We also had a question about another doozy about timelessness, things beyond time. And then we had, I guess, in a certain sense, the question of questions: what happens when we die, in terms of afterlife? And these are very, very, very big questions. And I'm going to try to. What I want to do here, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to ask questions, because as you know, I don't know if I didn't actually send out a reminder to some of my regular groups. So I think we're all Noahide, I think, today on the group. I don't think I have any some of my other just Jewish groups, but this class is for everyone. But it really is has a focus on Noahides, and we know that there's always a question of what you can teach, what you can't teach, and I want to explain the concept, because it's not necessarily only a question for Noahides. It's a question for everyone. There's certain things that I have to be very careful about teaching to Jews also. And the reason why you have to be careful about certain things is that when I give information or ideas that is beyond where a person is at, it doesn't register. It can cause confusion. And that's why there are specific things like certain Kabbalistic mystical secrets you can't teach to somebody. They have to know. So a lot of these things have to be very tailored to where we are at today, because we don't want a situation where a person is able to understand or is up to a certain level, and then they get something that's completely beyond, and it ends up confusing. And that's a very, very deep concept. It's a concept that has to do with body and soul. It has to do with the idea of, when you are a vessel, you can contain a certain amount of information. Like I had an understanding. I remember I had one time, there was a very wealthy donor, philanthropist, and he said to my rabbi once, he wanted to learn Kabbalah, mysticism is my rabbi, and my rabbi looked at me and said, "You can only go as deep as your soul is." And the guy got very insulted, because he was a very, But my rabbi was telling him that, like, it's not going to do you any good to go and talk about things that we don't have a ability to understand. And that's not just true. I'm not speaking down to anyone. That's true for me, true for everyone. Everyone has, wherever they're at, and what things are relevant to them. That's through the Noahide laws also. And I try to make this to teach the things that are relevant, because the things that are not relevant to a person's what's called avoda. Every human being has a mission in life. That's what it is. We're not here as a party. It's great. The world's amazing. It's beautiful. But we're here for a reason. And everything that we have to learn has to be relevant to, how do I make this real in my life? Okay, so that's why I like to hear the questions. I want to hear what people are saying, to try to make things that are relevant to you, that I don't shoot in places that are not relevant to your own personal growth and your service of God. Now, that's an introduction a little bit to the question I had last week about the afterlife. Now, the reason why it's an important question is because, and I gave my introduction, because it is, if you don't know where to look, you don't know really that much about the Jewish explanation of the afterlife. If you don't know where to look, you really don't know. As opposed to pretty much most religions who have a tremendous amount of discussions describing afterlife. Now, the description of these things, I can go into great detail. However, I want to explain to you first why you don't find in Jewish writings, other than in more esoteric writings, you don't find a great discussion about the afterlife. I'll explain to you why, and you'll understand a little bit, and I'll try to explain to you what it is. First of all, I want to tell you, as far as knowing the details, we have many details. So much so, there was one rabbi years ago, I mean, it's last past generation, he said he can never do anything wrong. Cannot sin. Why not? Because when he was like 6 years old, his father, who was a great sage, described to him in great detail everything that happens to the soul of a person if he acts wrong in this life. What will happen on the negative? Also the positive, but there's negative too. There are consequences for our actions. He described to him in such detail that this child grew up and said, I can't do anything wrong because I know the repercussions of what I'm going to do, for good and for not. So there is great detail that we go through in discussing this in mostly in esoteric writings. But the reason why you don't find this simply discussed in the books that everyone can open is for a very important reason. There's a lot of reasons, but I want to start with one. There was a very sad story, unfortunately, where there was a Arab terrorist years ago, and he ignited a bomb and it didn't go off. It went off a little bit, but it hurt him. But he did not complete his terrorist mission. And what happened was he was unconscious though, and he was in the hospital. He was handcuffed in a hospital bed because the police already caught this terrorist. And now he came to from his unconscious state, and he started motioning to the people, okay, send them in. And people were like, what? Send them in. I said, what are you talking about? I said, send in the 70 virgins. So one of the policemen that was there said, you think you're in heaven, buddy, but you're not. You're in hell. Because he had just been, he was now arrested. But now, what is the problem? What is the problem? The problem is when you try to describe a spiritual world, what you automatically do is you hear it in the most physical terms, because people are physical beings. It is very hard when you learn, Kabbalah, you learn the deeper mysticism. This is a bad word, but the Kabbalah, the tradition of how the world works and how God created the universe. So you really have to abstract. It's very, very, very complicated because we're abstracting. Because naturally, the mind, where our souls and bodies are connected, we cannot function without the body and soul being connected. If the body is detached from the soul, that we call death. A person, the soul without the body has no expression in this world, and the body without the soul is inanimate. And therefore, our whole ability to function in the world is translated into the physical. So when you start the more you try to describe the reality that is not physical, the world to come, Olam Haba is so amazing. How would I describe it? It's better than every pleasure you can imagine. As it says in the Mishnah, it says, if you took all of the pleasures of this world from the beginning of time to the end of time, and you put them all together, they wouldn't equal one moment of the pleasure of the world to come. But now the problem with that is, so what do you think? You think, oh, well, the world to come is like, oh, Baskin Robbins has 31 wonderful flavors, but how much is in eternity? So you made it into an ice cream parlor, or you made it into a harem, or you made it into whatever it is. And that's why when they describe these things, about trying to describe spiritual concepts in physical terms, people have a great misunderstanding. And what comes in different religions is their own fallacy in their misunderstanding. And people think when you talk to the Western world of heaven, it's like a giant golf course. It's you sitting back and you're having a grand old time. They got a giant IMAX there. I don't know, but it is so counter to what the world to come is, and that's the problem. The problem is that the more words you use to describe, the less you understand. So I try to describe this in one way that I think is helpful to people to a certain degree. If you would imagine, I would ask a person, I would say, what do you want in life? Okay. And most people start and they say, well, I want to have a great job. Okay, you got it. Now what do you want? Then they say, no, I want to make a lot of money. Okay, you got that. Now what do you want? Oh, I want a giant house. You got that too. Now what do you want? Now, what will happen with every single human being who is a functional person? They're all going to then make a shift between a physical pleasure to a spiritual pleasure. Everybody. That's also about love, unity, transcendence, connection. Whatever word they're using. And that moves from the physical pleasure to something that has something beyond the physical pleasure. Love is an example of something that is beyond the physical pleasure. Because if I said to a person, I said, listen, you, Mr. Jones, really love hamburgers. Oh, I love hamburgers. Yeah, sure. And your son Billy is causing you a lot of problems. Yeah, you drive me crazy. Okay, Mr. Jones, we're going to exchange your son Billy for a lifetime supply of hamburgers. There's no normal person in the world would do that because you can't compare the two. They're not. Hamburgers is a physical pleasure. Love is a connection to something that is above a physical pleasure. Physical pleasures all work the same. So I'm going to save you a lot of trouble here. Physical, they all work on the same principle. It's lacking, filling, lacking, filling. So a guy goes and he loves steak. He has a steak dinner. And he finishes and he's full. And I come over and I say, okay, I'm going to give you another steak, but on one condition. You need to eat it right now. Can't do it. I have no desire for it. Come back to me tomorrow. Maybe come back to me in 2 hours. If it's Chinese, we'll come back to me in an hour and a half. But whatever it is that until I have the vacancy and the lacking, then I don't want it. When I have that vacancy lacking, then I want to be filled. I'm filled. I don't want it anymore because the physical pleasures are limited to the physical universe. They're bound in time and space. Spiritual pleasures are not. You can't say I love too much. I love you enough. No. You feel more love. It's not based on a limited time, space continuum. And so therefore, we have to start understanding, when we talk, and this example I have to give people to get an understanding a little bit about the idea of the world to come. Some of that will make sense to us. Try to make it, fit into something that we have vessels to understand. So I ask people, what do you want? And they say, a good job. And then when they say they want to feel this feeling of love or this feeling of connection, So I say to him, okay, now think of a time when you felt like really one with everything. I don't know, you're sitting under a beautiful starry night, you're in the Grand Canyon. I don't know what it was. You felt the love towards your child that was born, whatever that was, whatever feeling that you could get out of your physical limited reality. And that one moment that you feel that, I want you to take that feeling and multiply it times 100. Multiply it times 1,000. Times 1,000,000. Now multiply times infinity. That's the closest I can get to explaining what is the world to come. The world to come is an ability to experience godliness. The terms that we use, love, connection, these are sort of ways that we experience an aspect of godliness. But the source of all existence is the pleasure of eternity. Now, I got to get this out of our heads here, because this is a really bad mistake that is based in the Western world. Because you really have a dichotomy in the Eastern world, the Western world, and we'll call the Middle East, we'll call Israel. And you have a very different view. The Eastern world tries to make everything God, right? The trees, and so they come to these ideas of everything is God, everything, this, that, the tree, the book, everything. They try to see God in everything. The Western world really, and they don't realize they're doing this. And many people on this channel and on this class come from religions that do this, and we don't realize it. They put God out there. Yeah, you go once a week, you pay your dues, God leaves you alone, whatever. And they picture they're here, God's out there. And therefore, that view of the world sort of leads to a picture of heaven as a really nice place that you go and stay there. It's like a place. This is not correct. The reality is much, much deeper. There's a reality of the experience, we call it in the Middle East, we call it from Torah perspective, understands that in one sense, there's nothing else but God. In one sense, how do I exist? Where do I exist? That's a great question. Wonderful. At the same time, I have to separate and say, okay, this is a holy place. I can make a blessing here. I can't make a blessing in the bathroom. I separate. But there is an ability to understand a very deep idea of the two extremes that the world has taken. There's a blending of the two, which is they're both true and both not true. God permeates all existence, and he's above existence. Now, I tell you this, why? Because when I say to you experiencing godliness, it doesn't mean that at 1 minute you get there and now you got, as the Western world thinks, yeah, the guy made it to heaven, he's sitting there and now he's got his seat, and he's sitting there. No, it's endless. The experience of the pleasure of connecting to our source goes on forever. I don't know if it ever looks like. I don't know what a world outside of time looks like. We talk about it a lot. Rod asked me last week. It's something that we really, in the deeper wisdoms, we talk about quite a bit. But we can't think of a world outside of time. Right? Because once you have words, you go and you take it and you put it into an organizational fashion. The ability of the mind to touch timelessness is a very, very hard job that the mystics, the prophets would do. It's a certain way of trying to think. Some people try to meditate to get there. But what happens is that God is not in time. Time is a creation. Time is a creation. Time and space are a creation. If you want to learn about Einstein's theory of relativity, I can show you where that theory is written in great detail and much more accurately over 4,000 years ago. By Abraham. Abraham wrote a book called the Sefer Yetzirah, where he describes this space-time soul continuum. And so what happens is that when a person, it's so hard for me to put this into words because you're like, so what's the rabbi talk about? Where's he going? But the answer is I can't, because the pleasure of connecting to your source is such a great pleasure. It's not limited. It's not, you don't get it. We go on, and every time we get further, deeper understandings, because we'll never, and this is really, I told you this, guys, before, it's one of the greatest mistakes of one of those dangerous mistakes of the various religions in the world who try to understand God. You cannot understand God. You can't. It's not possible. It's not. What you understand is how God chooses to relate to us. He gives us a way. He created a world from his endless kindness to give us a way to connect to him. And that's what you could understand. Those are the various names of God, right? The people who think that, these foolish people who try to read the Bible, wait a minute, why is there different names of God? And then crazy theories. Well, the answer is because this is the different names. This is how God manifests, how he runs his world. But I don't understand God himself. Once you think you understand God yourself, you know what you've done? What many religions have done. They've made God into a human being. You understand God. So what happens after we die? Yes, there's a whole process where the soul goes. And that's why there's the mourning process, because the soul goes the first 3 days, the first 7 days, the soul is going on its journey. And that's why after a year, a person can pass the mourning phase, because the soul can go to where it has to go in terms of its next level. It's moved into a different state of existence and consciousness and connection to God. But and there's great details of what these things are. But the bottom line, what you need to understand is, to give more physical words to it, you'll understand it less. To understand it in the sense that God has created this world. That's why I said to you before, that amazing, I quoted the mission before, it says, if you took all the pleasures in the world to come, this world, like from the beginning of time to end of time, and you added them all together, it wouldn't equal 1 second of pleasure in the world to come. And not even seconds, because there's no time. But I didn't have the second half. Second half says, if you took all of the pleasures of the world to come, it's not the same as having the ability to do it now yourself. Now we have a world where we're able to go and to make things ourselves. When the game is over and the truth is revealed, then you have the experience of the pleasure of reward. But the work part of it is much different, because today we live in a world where there's just a lot of lies. And for a person to see through those lies, so that's hard work. And when you see through those lies and you do the commandments you need to do, the Noahides do their 7 commandments, and the Jews do their 13 commandments, and everyone says, I do my mission right now. One of my rabbis said a very interesting thing to me this week, which is a very, very deep thing. It's talking in a Kabbalistic sense. But even when you talk about, let's say, a non-Jew is not commanded to eat kosher food. So if a Jew would eat non-kosher food and do a good deed with it, the good deed wouldn't go anyplace from that energy, because he can't take that animal or whatever it is that's not kosher and use it something positive. A person who's a Noahide, who will go and he can eat even non-kosher food, and he's allowed to, and he does a good deed with that energy, he is elevating even that in creation. So every single person, Jews, non-Jews, everyone, male, female, everyone, has important things to do in this world. And that's what we do in this world. When we work in this world and we realize we're in an important mission, then what's going to happen is we develop the sensitivity, the connection. The word mitzvah, commandment, is a deeper meaning. The word mitzvah also means connector. That's what it means. The word mitzvah, the deeper meaning is savta, means a connection, a spiritual, physical connector. They connect me to my source. I do a physical act and it connects me. Okay? I set up a court system in America where you're going to have truth and justice. You are now using a connector to connect you to spiritual, to the physical action. So what happens is in this world we have that opportunity. And then when the soul leaves, so what happens is it is now able to, it's developing a sensitivity. It's like a person who let's say, who, for example, let's say, wants to be a wine connoisseur. So he sips the wine. I don't know how everyone, what people, how they grew up. I know my kids, I used to always give them, they have kiddish on Friday night. They had some good wine. They developed a taste for it. And if a person develops a taste for wine, they appreciate wine. If someone who never drank wine and you give them a good dry wine, they're like, it's terrible because they have no sensitivity to it. A person that lives their lives in a completely physical, unspiritual, disconnected, non-mitzvot life, when they leave this world, they have a very great difficulty in experiencing the eternal pleasure. I'll give you and this is, I don't want to get into the details of what happens to the soul, but this is it's kind of a scary one. I'll give it to you to understand. It's like the example of a person goes, let's say, all they care about their whole life is like eating or like weightlifting, pumping iron. Now, eating is very good. If you eat to do something good, it's great. If you lift weights to be healthy, to do something good, that's great. But let's say a person who all he cares about is pumping iron, all he cares about is eating all day. So what happens is when his soul leaves, he's created a consciousness that his soul is looking for the hamburger or looking for the gym. It knows it's in a place of no gyms, no hamburgers. So what you build right now, the connection that you build through the commandments, the 7 Noahide commandments, plus the other commandments that are called sichlios, that make sense, that are the logical, not the ones the Jews are obligated, but all the ones that the Noahides can be obligated, or the Jews keeping their commandments. That is building up your physical, spiritual connection. And when the soul leaves, the soul is able to begin a process of experiencing godliness, which goes on forever. And that is the greatest pleasure possible. Okay, I hope I haven't said too much. I'm going to answer the other question we had about angels in a minute, but I kind of dealt a little bit with what some of the things that were asked about what Rod said about timelessness and about the world to come. Let me take some questions on that so far. Please feel free. I could add some stuff to it. I think Sandy, your hand up.
Yes, Rabbi. I've heard over the last few weeks and months several lectures on the soul and along those lines what you've been talking about, and I keep hearing different phrases that I'm not sure, are they interchangeable or are they just exactly what they mean? And I keep hearing the Gentile soul, the non-Jewish soul, and the righteous non-Jewish soul. What is the difference between those three? Are they interchangeable or are they definite differences there?
So what there is that there are different types of souls. As much as we can talk about types, we don't know what souls look like. But there is a Jewish soul, there's a non-Jewish soul. That's why there's a difference between the commandments. So 13 commandments is what a Jewish soul needs. Seven Commandments is what a non-Jewish soul needs. They don't need what what each other one has. So this term, I don't know, is a Gentile, who is a not Jewish, that's all the same thing. The difference is that just like you have a Jewish soul who a person could act righteous, you could have a non-Jewish soul, a person can be righteous or not be righteous. So there's no differentiation between non-Jewish, Gentile, or righteous. It's the same soul. It's just, has the person acted properly? Because if they acted properly, then they are able to. And I want to explain this because it's very important. There are basic certain tenets that we have to understand. Maimonides put the 13 principles of faith for Jewish people, and the principles should be adhered to by everyone because they're principles of faith. Now, Maimonides, it breaks them up into 13. We can break them up into another system called a system of three, based on a book that was quoted by Dan a number of weeks ago, called the book of Ikrim. I don't know how to say it in English. The book of the principles. I don't know how to say it in English. It's called Sefer Ikrim by Rabbi Yosef Elbo, and Rabbi Yosef Elbo says that he distills into three principles. Maimonides fleshes it out more, but one is a belief in God. Maimonides fleshes it out and says you can't believe in a physical God. Corporal God is contradictory to God. The idea of God having another part is a bit conscious to God. So Maimonides fleshes out what the discussion is, but Yosef Elbo says that one believes a belief in God. Okay. The second fundamental belief is that God gave a binding Torah. Okay. He gave a pathway for human beings to connect to him. That can never, so Maimonides adds, it can never be changed, it can never be altered. He talks about the prophecy, the difference between the prophecy of Moses, which was a direct dictation from God. But the second basic principle is a Torah that God gave, the instruction booklet, how to live our lives, that is true, that is never changing. And the third one is reward and punishment. And then Maimonides goes through different characteristics of the word punishment, to talk about the idea of the belief in the times of Mashiach and this and that. But the basic concept is the idea of that there's reward and punishment. Now, it's very, very important, people, to realize. People don't like that. We live in a world today, people don't like to hear the word reward and punishment. You gotta give your kid a trophy for trying, and we don't like the idea. But it's a very crucial idea. And it's so crucial that without understanding that there's reward and punishment, a person's not functioning properly. Now, I can go and make this a little bit more elevated, if you like, and talk about consequences of our actions. There has to be consequences for our actions. If there are not, then we are not in this world for any purpose. Good things create good responses. Bad things create bad responses. God is always seeking for our good. And therefore, if a person does good and bad, God does not say, but they are essentially a good person, God does not say, oh, we'll cancel them out. No, there'll be negative consequences for the negative so that there will be eternal good for the good. You don't want to go and say, hey, let's cancel the two out, because the good reward is eternal. So a person wants to get that. And if they make mistakes, they want the negative consequence to happen so that they can be in line with getting the good that they make. Because God is always looking to do good for everyone, that everyone in the world, everyone, even bad people. God is waiting for them to change. Many verses in the prophets. God does not want the death of the dead ones. And rather, he should turn back his ways and live. Many, many, many verses that God is waiting for every single person to act good, to get themselves together. And he's giving you signs, constant love letters to wake up. And the purpose of that is that way, when we do the good things, we could connect. This is the place for work. And it's not like people have a very childish understanding about it. People think they're intellectuals and they're not. Oh, they say you do this work now, you get all the next world. Well, it's interesting because, by the way, in the Torah doesn't discuss in great detail the promise of the world to come. It's fascinating. It discusses some of the promises of what you're getting in this world. And one of the explanations is because many religions used to say, you know what? Don't worry. You be poor now, you'll get it all later. Because who dies and comes back and says, hey, it didn't happen to them. The Torah does talk about what will happen in this world if you keep the good things and if you keep the bad things. The Torah does talk about what will happen in this world because Hashem, who wrote the Torah, is not worried about, it'll be disproven because he wrote it. And he's saying, if you act this way, have good responses in this world, negative consequences in this world. But that's all preparatory. The greater thing is the reward we get in this world is an assistance to allow us to do more good things to get eternity. So the answer to your question, Sandy, is that no, there's not a difference between those names. There are different types of souls, and the person acts righteously. Even if they make mistakes, they act righteously and they're trying this and that. So then their experience after they leave this world is different. Very, very, very different. Now, again, Hashem is looking for ways to go and to help everyone and save everyone and redeem everyone and purify everyone. And there are very, very few people, says the Ramchal, that are so evil there's no way to fix them up. But there are people like that. There's Hitlers in the world that have sold out from their existence, and they do not have a place in the world of eternity. A righteous non-Jew does have a portion in the eternal world. So that's the answer to the question. Wait, Tar, remind me your question. I forgot what was your question again? Remind me.
It's about the lost souls, the lost tribes, right. And the souls from those lost tribes in today's time.
Okay, so there's two more questions to answer. One is there is great discussion about what happens to the 10 tribes of Israel. The 10 tribes of Israel were exiled. And there's great discussions about will they come back or are they lost? The accepted conclusion seems to be that they will be brought back. There are Jews that don't know they're Jewish, and they have been lost, but they still are Jewish. And times of Mashiach, they will be aroused and awakened and understand who they are. By the way, these things you see them today to a certain degree. I mean, I had that. I was a guy. I was sitting in Alabama with a guy. It's a Christian guy. He was going on a trip to Israel, and someone brought him to my house for Shabbat. He loved it. Got so turned on. And he's talking to us after the meal, and he says, I have Jewish blood. I said, really? What is it? He goes, it was way back, my mother's 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 mother. I said, I don't think you realize it, but you're actually Jewish. So that was surprise. So there are a lot of stories of people being brought back. This is not talking about the souls, because the soul is something else. The soul of a person, that's a Jewish soul, and that will get its fixing in the processes that it gets. I'm talking about the actual people, because if somebody intermarries, the kids are not Jewish. Jewish lineage goes by the mother. So if a man marries a non-Jewish woman, the kid is not Jewish, which is a great problem for the person now because his kids aren't Jewish. So the 10 tribes are people who are actually Jewish that were exiled, and they're in the Afghanistan area. So they're exiled to Assyria, which is now present Afghanistan, that area. And so there are Jews there that that don't even realize it, and they will at some point when Mashiach comes. It says that they're going to be made known what they are, and you see it happening today. People that, like I say, I've seen people who have wild stories of people who went to convert. They found that they were, and they and I've had this. People came to me, and they felt they had to convert this and that, and then they found out that like they were actually Jewish. So it's fascinating. The last question I have was Lara's question about the names of the angels. So this is a very long, complicated topic, but I'm going to try to make it brief and hopefully easy. But it's really not easy because it's mind-boggling. All languages, except for the Holy Tongue, are created by an agreement of people on what to call an item. Okay? If I call this a cup, so we all agree to call it a cup, I call it a cup. We call it a casa. I don't know, that's house, I guess, in Spanish. I don't know how to say cup in Spanish. But whatever we agree. There is not in itself a spiritual power of the words to name an item. It's whatever people agree to. Now, if you go back to the story of the Tower of Babel, you'll see there that they all spoke Hebrew, the holy language. So there were variations that came to the people when the 70 languages came out in Tower of Babel. And this is a very, 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 very deep idea. So there's a phrase, a Talmudic phrase. It's important in one of the early sources. It's not really Talmudic, but it's phrased by some of the sages. I'll say it in Aramaic because I love the way it sounds. In Aramaic, it says, Lishna kulmasa de liba, which means the tongue is the pen of the heart. And what does that mean? When you look at, let's say, the French, how do the French talk? Very, very flowing, very, very romantic. And then you look at the Germans, very boxed. What does that mean? Means the tongue is the pen of the heart. The psychology of the nation is transmitted through how they communicate. And this is a little problem for English, which, as an American, so, English is called a neuter language. The romantic languages or the Torah, the real language, everything's male-female because it says in the Bible, it's created male-female. Tar, there's not 27 different genders or 3,000 or whatever number they're up to. There are two. There is male, female. So everything's created male, female. So that's the language. In English, you say the idea of it, which creates, in my opinion, the British a little bit, distant. Americans came and like, I'm John Wayne, and I'm like, I'm going to talk like this. And like, they made it a lot more, colloquial and down to earth, but it still has that distance. Every language is thereby an agreement of people, and the nation that creates it, breaking up from the 70 nations, which were the root of the 70 languages, which really parallel the one nation of Israel, the 70, right? The 7 days of the week was 1 to 7, 1 to 70. So the Jewish nation and the 70 languages, which is the 70 roots of the 70 nations, they all express their own view of the world through their communication of how they feel and how they see the world, and they agree to call certain things certain ways. And really, all languages are based on those 70 roots of the languages. And the truth is, on a positive level, there is the ability for every nation to bring in whatever goodness they have from their place and their point of view and their language, bring it into the system. And that's why Moses translated the Torah. God told him to translate the book of Deuteronomy to 70 languages, that there should be a connection. But there is one language that is not an idea of an agreed upon word. It is the actual DNA of every created thing. That is not modern Hebrew, even though it's similar, but that is called the Holy Tongue. And that language is actually every letter. I have a series that I've done for people. I can go through every Hebrew letter for hours. Explain each letter and then how they combine and what they mean. Because every letter has a way that's formed, its structure. It has a way it sounds. It has a numerical value. And all of those things and those letters are the energy pack where the spirituality that God created in the world, the life force, is going to come into the world through the Holy Tongue. And that's why when you take the Hebrew letters and you combine them, you don't just get arbitrary things, you actually get the source of the thing that you're saying. So, for example, this one I like telling Americans, because everyone in America likes dogs, right? Or loves dogs, It's like a guy can commit the worst crime, but if he means the dogs, that guy, you got to cancel him. But everyone loves dogs. So the word in Hebrew for a dog is called kelev. Kelev is from the word kol, all, lev, all heart. The dog is loyalty. Let's say the ant is called a nemala. And the word amel. Amel means to work. The ant gathers more food in its life that it'll never live to ever eat, even a fraction of what it gathers. And God made it and just keeps gathering. Every single Hebrew word, the chatul is the word chitul, which in modern Hebrew it means a diaper, but the root of it in biblical Hebrew means to clean yourself, means to be. Your cat is very different than your dog. The cat, like a person walks to the house, and the cat acts like he owns the house. He cleans himself. He's very, hey, what are you doing here? I'm the cat. I'm in charge. He cleans himself. He wants to be very distinguished. He's very aloof. He has a certain cleanliness of his, which is his way of showing his refinedness. Every single animal. And that's when man gave name to the animals, it was such an incredible thing, because it wasn't he was naming a dog Spot. He looked at the essence of the creation. He saw it in the Hebrew letters, and he said, that's what it is, and that's what it really was. He wasn't just naming it. And that's the answer to the question about the names of the angels also, because they're not arbitrary names. They all are rooted in their function in the world. The name in Hebrew for angel is called a malach. Malach. A malach is from the Hebrew word melacha. Melacha means an action. The angels are the spiritual laws, just like gravity is a physical law. If I drop my vitamins, they'll fall, because the law is that gravity works that way. So too, there are spiritual laws, and the will that God creates of how the world should function is what a malach is. It is a spiritual law. And each name of every angel is the essence of what that angel is in the world. So that's the answer to your question, Lara. The names of the angels are as the names of everything in the Torah. is the primordial essence of that being, which is subsumed into the holy, eternal language that the world was created with.
Did Adam give the names to the angels?
Doesn't say he gave the name to the angels. Doesn't say that. It says that he knew the names of the angels. We know the names of the angels. It's a very, the whole system is a very, very, very complicated, very, very good things. Again, just to be clear, I don't like to use the word angels because then we get Western concepts of God's little helpers. God doesn't need little helpers. Angels are the system of the world that God conceals himself through by giving the laws of the spiritual world. So, for example, and I said to you before, if I take this item and I this is a cap, I drop it. I say, why did it fall? You say, it fell because of gravity. Now, are you right? Yeah, you're right. But you're also wrong. Why? Because why did it fall? Because God wanted it to fall. Oh, wait a minute, Rabbi. Are you saying there's such thing as science? No, there is. God created a system. And the system that he created, that he wanted it to fall, we've named that process, which does work in God's system, as gravity. So too, when there is a spiritual system, that is the rules that God wants to do. And therefore, in a certain sense, it's the system God creates, and we are experiencing the world through, so to speak, the filters of what in the root of it is God's will. So there are many, many, many different types of angels. And again, not angels like in the idea of helpers, but in the spiritual systems, just like, people, it's funny to me how people that are intellectuals and they are smart in science and they really have such childish understandings of the spiritual realm. If you understand there are trillions of galaxies, and what is it, 2 trillion, and how many stars in each galaxy, there's kind of different numbers they have. That is a minor reflection of the spiritual worlds that are the roots of these things. The world is very, very, very complicated. So there are many, many spiritual rules, so to speak, that God created, and they have those names, and those are the names that were their essence names. It didn't say when Adam named the animals, it wasn't that he made it up. It was that he understood what their real name was.
So
God wanted him to look at the creation and to express in the creation his understanding of the creation. But it wasn't that he made them up. That was who they were.